Good morning, Patriots.
Good morning, sir. I think you're
Good
talking
morning.
to me.
Good morning.
Q, good morning.
Yes.
Morning, guys.
Hello. Let's get this chat going here. All right. So we have Joel the Wise, Michael the Prophet, and myself as just, well, myself.
It's Ben. Wise, the prophet, and Ben.
Sounds like a TV show. How are y'all doing?
Doing all right.
It's Friday. It's Friday. I'm doing good. There's always so much going on, and that's a loaded question.
Fridays are just great days. It's typically the end of the week for most people. It's a day where we have this, but it's also a day where really cool things happen. Like, oh, I don't know, like this bottom image here.
The bottom image.
Something that the left did not see coming. By the way, this was all taken in 1 year. In 1 year.
That's right. It's got a little bit of a timeline, isn't it?
Yep. In 1 year, Trump gained complete support in multiple communities by the mugshot. Then our Lord God kept him alive by millimeters. And then out of nowhere, just after the DNC finished, the lifelong Democrat RFK endorsed Donald Trump.
That's crazy talk.
It's insane. I did not see that coming, but last Friday was insane. So that was at a rally in Arizona. So since then, there is a word that has been used constantly. The word is unity. For the first time in a very long time, we are seeing something happen that we never thought would actually happen. A Kennedy supporting Donald Trump. And this partnership represents this new form of unity. It's no longer Republicans or Democrats. It's the people unifying under a common hatred for the swamp, the establishment, those in charge that have been pulling the strings for far too long. And not just Kennedy, but I've seen other really cool images of people making. You have Musk, a Democrat who supports Trump, Kennedy supporting Trump, and now Tulsi Gabbard has put her vote in saying, hey, I'm supporting Trump. So what we're seeing here is this new unity party,
Coalition.
this new unifying force, right? Where the old divisions aren't there anymore. And let's be clear, I do not agree with RFK on a lot of things, okay? But when you see these two guys supporting each other, saying, listen, we both hate what has happened to our country, and we need to speak the truth and fight for what we know is right. So, before we go any further, what are y'all's thoughts on what happened last Friday? Oh my gosh.
Well, I'll just go ahead instead of Michael and I fighting to see who goes first.
I saw you open your mouth and inhale.
Kindergartners with gray beards. But it's funny. I heard about it earlier in the day on some things I heard as I was on the radio as I was driving around. And a lot of people have said this. Dennis Prager said this last night. I wasn't paying much attention to Robert Kennedy before this. I mean, I knew he was there kind of as a just a aside. I know the Democrats Party didn't want him, that's a whole nother show. Why in the world Democrats don't want a Kennedy? But that just shows you how crazy the Democrats have become. And so I don't know that much about him other than I know he's not a conservative. And the thing I liked about it was that he has a specific role. I watched his announcement, the full uh, speech he gave when he endorsed Trump and why. And I even had my wife look at it, as she hates politics. But I'm like, no, listen to it, because he brings up, he most of the time on the health of our children,
Right.
which is
Right.
something that I have been seeing for years, especially the young men, boys and men, how unhealthy they are mentally and physically. And he gave this whole spiel as to why. And children aren't my thing. Children are my wife's thing. And I said, listen to that and see what you think, because I think he's really onto something. Because the world for a young man or a boy is so much different than the world was when I was a boy and a young man, that he's got to be onto something. So I don't necessarily trust Robert Kennedy or Tulsi Gabbard or Elon Musk, but we'll take their support. Actually, I'm not really trusting Trump that much either. After what he's got all this unity coming from the left, but then his campaign throws a wrench in it on abortion and reproductive rights. That's getting all the people on the right a little nervous and upset. So I think it's a good thing for one reason. The Democrats are stark raving lunatics right now. And that's what these people on the left are seeing. They're seeing their party going over the edge. And the only other option they have is Trump. But when they do that, they seem to be pulling Trump left. And that's what's making me nervous. So yes, we're unified for now, but pray that it stays that way, and pray that they don't exert undue pressure and undue power on where we're going and where Trump will take this country. Does that make sense?
Right. Now, yet this is why I appreciate y'all's input, because on one hand, there is definitely room for celebration, but there's always room to be mindful. We're given the gift of discernment. We can't just blatantly celebrate without being wise first. So, no, I love those points. Michael, what are your thoughts on this?
Amazing trio of pictures there. That just three iconic, like historic, for the record book pictures. Yeah, like, and I like the point. Each one of these brings new demographics into the fold. Right, that first picture, I've heard people think it's racist to say, oh, now convicted felons are on the side of Trump. It's like, the facts are what they are, right? Somebody who's been convicted of a felony, a lot of them think they're wrongly convicted. And you look at Trump as being wrongly, it's like they immediately identify with this guy. It's like, oh, that guy's being persecuted like me. And then the one in the middle is just obviously when 50 years from now, when people look back at the Trump presidency, that's the first picture, right? That's the first picture everyone's going to see. And watching live his reaction to a death, like near death. He had a near death experience, and seeing his character proven out. It's like, oh yeah, this guy's for real. And then and then that is uniting a bunch of people. And then obviously RFK. I saw RFK in person about 5 years ago, pre-pandemic. A friend of mine invited me to. He's like, hey, this guy RFK is speaking over here. And the friend that invited me used to work for Project Veritas. So he was kind of informed on all kinds of stuff. And he's like, hey, you want to come hear RFK? I didn't even know who he was at the time. And I went and I listened. And I'm like, this guy's compelling. And he was just focused on vaccines and the changes in the pharmaceutical industry over the decades, and his concerns and the statistics. He's just pointing out statistics and data, right? He didn't come across as some kind of kook. When he's focused on the issues that he's really good at, it's like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I didn't even know he was a Democrat. I went to this thing and I had no idea what side. I had zero idea. The place was packed. It was in like Beverly Hills somewhere, and it was like packed with a bunch of rich people. I'm like, oh, this is an interesting crowd. And it was
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And you didn't have any idea he was Democrat?
well, because this particular friend invited me to this thing, right?
Oh,
It's
okay.
like you don't assume, because somebody has a last name, what necessarily their leanings are. And this particular guy invited me to this thing. I'm like, oh, what's this thing we're going to? And then I realized who he was and all that. And then now he's he's on the main stage next to the big guy. And I'm like, watching this history unfold right before our eyes. It's exciting. And I think to quell your fears, Joel, God is in control, right? Trump.
Oh, God's always been in control.
Yeah.
God's been in control the last 50 years as 30 million babies have been aborted. God's in control. Sometimes I don't quite know what he's doing, but yes, I hear you. So
when I think about, as you were saying, the damage that RFK could do if he's in the wrong position, right? If he's somehow put in a position of authority where we disagree with him, there could be damage. But man, head of the CIA is one thing that's been floating around, and that's not a political position. That's let's clean out our country. I mean, it shouldn't be a political position,
yes.
right? It has been used and he'd be perfect for that. That guy exposing what happened to his uncle and his father and Trump, right? Exposing these things and cleaning house. Oh my gosh. Or Health and Human Services. This guy's going to take on big pharma. He's going to take on big food. He's going to take on all these big industries that have been compromised.
The military industrial complex is another big factor.
So
here's what's so interesting. Back in 2016, when Trump won the election, the world was shocked. No one saw that coming. That wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to win the election. However, Trump had a lot of experience, but let's be honest, he had a lot of people on his team that were wolves in sheep's clothing. That we all thought he had a good team, but in reality, to be honest, in my opinion, it wasn't until halfway through his first term they started realizing, wait a second, these people aren't on my side. Wait a second. This swamp is much deeper than I ever thought. He was still learning a lot of these new things. But where we are at now and what has happened since 2020, since 2021, what I'm seeing this go around is he's realizing, wait a second, I need to make sure the people on my side don't just blatantly agree with me on everything, but they need to have a shared hatred for what truly matters. And that is the establishment, the swamp, the political elite that have been controlling everything. And so if I can find people who we can sit at the table, have a cup of coffee and disagree with, if we can all come to a common understanding, that's the team I want. And that's what I'm seeing him do. You have guys like Elon Musk, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard. These people definitely aren't all on the same page for everything. But what do they all have in common? They are all hated by the left. They are despised by the Democrats. Well, listen, you and I may not agree, but I hate the government. You hate the government. We both hate this swamp. Let's destroy it together and start fresh. Let's come to the table and talk. And that's honestly what I think so many Americans who aren't left or right, who are kind of in the center, that's what they've been craving. That's what they've been missing this whole time. Just have a conversation, just talk, and let's see if we can move forward with this. So, anyways, of all people to have every right to hate the government, it's RFK. His father and his uncle both being assassinated by, in my opinion, I'm a firm believer that his uncle and father were both taken out by a 3-letter agency. I'm a firm believer in that now. But here's the issue. we can't forget the true unifier. As great as these people are, and as hopeful as I am for the future, for this unity ticket, this unifying force, the original unifier was Christ. And this was the coolest image I could find. There's thousands of images of Jesus Christ, but a lot of them were kind of cheesy, cartoony. I didn't want that. I wanted something more mature like this. Christ was the original and always the great unifier. And Joel sent me a wonderful verse to support this. So, Joel or Michael, which one would you like to read?
You do it, Joel.
Joel,
All right.
okay. Go for it.
This is John 17, verse 20. I am not asking on behalf of these alone, but also for those who believe in me through their word, that they may be one, just as you, Father, and are in me, and I in you, that they may also be in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. So, the glory which you have given me, I also have given to them, so that they may be one, just as we are one. I and them, you and me, that they may be perfect in unity, so the world may know that you sent me and you love them just as you love me.
The part that really stood out to me is I in them and you in me, that they may be perfected in unity, so that the world may know that you sent me and you loved them just as you loved me. So the real thing that truly matters is that Christ was the great unifier. He was the one that was sent to save the world, to conquer death, and to show his enemies that I am the way. No matter how much you attack me, no matter how much you torture me, no matter how much you think you killed me, you didn't. And no matter how much my disciples will suffer, at the end of the day, I am the way, I am the light, I am the great unifier. And so, ultimately, what do we do with this? How do we move forward when we see what's going on in our world, as unifying as broken human beings can be? What's our ultimate goal? Michael, I'll let you answer that in your prophetic ways.
You must hear my mind churning, my thoughts spinning here. Unity is the most powerful weapon, or the most powerful tool. Or think about this. It's the purpose of propaganda, to get people on the same page, right? It's to convince them of something, a cause. You get into a football stadium, especially when you're at the home field, and when the home team scores that last minute winning touchdown, and the entire crowd explodes. You're feeling the power, right? If you've ever had that experience in a stadium, when the team, whether you're rooting for that team or not, when you feel that, there's a spiritual dynamic happening when people are unified behind one purpose. And that's what worship services are for, right? You're supposed to go in there and see those words on the screen, or read them and sing them and hear them. And a preacher's up there to help align you. This is what the word teaches, to get us in unison. And that verse that we read is the future, right? It's a vision of the future. God's will shall prevail, and one day, right, we shall all be in perfect unity. And so when we see things this side of eternity that are bringing people into unity, that's where we feel the Spirit, right? We feel the confirmation, we feel joy, we feel, obviously being united around the truth, right? People can be united around the wrong things and foolish things, but the unity, it's in God's hands. And as reality unfolds, and as information technology makes that reality available to more and more people, even though people yes, information technology makes falsehood and all kinds of nonsense and multiple voices available, but it also makes it possible for more and more people to have the truth and more truth. And so technology is God's plan, just like, he had to take the sin with you can't love unless you have the choice to hate, right? You can't love God without the choice to reject God. And so there's a greater good, right? And I swear by this technology that this is a unifying in God's ultimate scheme. It's unifying us. You and I can see these things happening the minute they happen now, right? 10 years ago you couldn't, or 20 years ago you have to wait for the paper to come out or something. Now, as truth unfolds, we see it in real time, and there's less time for falsehoods to be fabricated and implemented, right? The faster we get information, the closer unity comes. And so I'm encouraged. I love this topic. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, but it's near and dear to the Lord's heart, that we and that we set aside the differences. There's that quote. I used to attribute it, or people have attributed it to St. Augustine, but it's not him. But I used to say, as St. Augustine said, I forget the name of the guy who said it, but it's in the essentials, we must have unity. In the non-essentials, we can allow diversity, but in all things, charity. Right? So in the essentials of the gospel, we have to agree. There are certain fundamental essentials. In the non-essentials, like infant baptism or not, or how often do you take communion, the non-essentials, set those aside. Don't fight about them. In all things, charity. Charity is that archaic term for love. Love one another. That's true unity. It's God's whole plan. So it's exciting to watch enemies set their differences aside for a common cause. That's the most powerful force, unity.
Joel, your points there.
This is one of my favorite verses, and this shows you God's plan for evangelism.
Right.
His plan for evangelism is the unity of his disciples. And we get this wrong so often. We think we need to all be unified with everybody, peace and love. No, Jesus said, he's talking to his disciples here. He's saying, and he's praying for his disciples, saying, Father, make them one like you and I are one, so the world will know that you sent me. That's how the world knows. We don't love the world. He even says earlier, they're not of the world.
Right.
But I'm not, he goes on earlier saying, I'm not asking you to take him out of the world. I'm asking that you leave him in the world. And he's leaving us in the world so we can be unified together as his followers, as believers. And the world will see that. And the world will know that God loves them. So the world will know that God loves them by the way we love each other. And it's such a unique point, and it's something that we are almost completely missing because we're not. And that's one reason why I think Satan's master plan for battling this was to make us so divided. And as people of faith, we are divided. But hopefully Michael's right that, this, although the way the world is now will hopefully unify us as Christians, as believers. And that's going to be the thing that tells the world, hey, look who this Jesus is. We're united as people. In a world that's getting more and more divided, if we can get more and more unified, the world will see that and say, what's going on there? And that's when we tell them, this is the love we have. This is the God we follow.
Yeah, it wasn't excellent points. It wasn't until like 2015 that I started paying attention. I got out of the military and I started paying attention to what was going on around me. And that's when I started seeing identity politics being used to divide people. From my eyes, it was very little, but then over time, those divisions started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I started seeing clearly the left was just dividing everybody and making them fight against each other. When in reality, those differences really weren't that big to begin with. But the left made them so ferocious that if you dared disagree with me on this one little thing, we're going to fight. And that's horrible. One thing that I took a lot of pride in as a teacher, I taught all my students one important lesson. If they forgot everything else, they learned this one thing at least. They learned how to sit across the table from your enemy and have a conversation, have a cup of coffee, and find common ground. If you don't know how to do that, then you're not going to have a successful life. Now, I taught at a private school that wasn't, Christian affiliated, but I did my best to insert the truth as much as I could. And so on this topic, unity in truth, like Michael said, we can all unify around bad things. That's easy. The Germans did that in World War II. But unifying under the truth, that's more complex, because what is the truth? And that's where you get those divisions. This side believes the truth is letting people change their sex at any moment. This group might believe truth is, people can do with their bodies what they will. The other side believes the truth is, let's just keep fighting endless wars, because why not? But all of a sudden, those divisions are collapsing. What I'm seeing is people from all walks of life are coming together and saying, hey, we may not agree on everything, but let's agree on fundamental truths. And even though they may not all be Christians, that's where, that to me is where the right path starts, is when you have that unity in truth that we can agree on. And then my hope is that, my hope is kind of confirmed. God will keep showing us his plan. He gave us a little taste from July 13th? What was the date of the attempted assassination? I already forgot.
21st.
21st. So we've gotten a taste of that.
I think it was the 21st.
And so I don't know.
Maybe a week off.
Somewhere around there.
Just somewhere around there. Anyways, so I'm hopeful. I'm encouraged. But again, this keeps me humble, because it's like, at the end of the day, who was the great unifier? And it was Christ.
Can you bring that verse up again? I just want to.
Sure. Hold on. Bring it back up.
Misclick. So it's
Here we
this
go.
chapter. This John 17 is. Yeah. So I was rereading it here just to make sure I was remembering it correctly. So this obviously is Jesus praying, and this where we began here is where Jesus in his prayer transitions from praying just for those in his hearing. And in verse 20, he says, I'm not asking on behalf of these alone, but also for those who believe in me through their word. So he is saying, these people that I'm talking to directly are going to go out and repeat what I said, and through their testimony, not mine, their testimony, they're going to believe in me. And so this is Jesus praying for you and I, right? This is when Jesus directly prayed for you and I. To what end? We'll get down to the end, or in verse 21. That they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. It's the one essential that the entire world will come to believe, right? Will come to believe, as in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he sent his only son, that whosoever should believe in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And John 3:17, for God sent not his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. The world might be saved. And this is God we're talking about. He doesn't fail. He's telling us what's coming in the future, and he's helping us align in unison toward that end, because it is his will. And God
That's
is
the truth.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, guys. As always, that was fantastic. That was great.
Good stuff.
Yeah, last week was insane. So I'm very, very interested to see what happens in the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Before you know it, November will come around very soon.
It's
All right,
coming.
guys.
All
Have a
right.
wonderful day. Mike, you
See
want to
y'all.
sign us off real quick?
All right. Love you all. God is in control. You can click end
God's in
stream
control.
now. Bye, everybody.